Thank you so very, very much. Beloved friend, Pastor Mario, Eric Stillman, all of those responsible for this magnificent gathering, Brother Malcolm, who is a very, very good friend for many years, my beloved brothers and sisters all. Just one small note. The Talmud teaches that ultimately, in the days of the Messiah, all of the Jewish sanctuaries and houses of study are going to be recycled into Jerusalem. And they will all make their way to Israel. I would like to ask Rabbi Har, I'm putting in my dibs right now. In Efrat, I would love this sanctuary to be recycled. I took that as an assent. I'm very humbled by so many of the things that I've been hearing just these last few minutes. Pastor Carlos speaks so strongly about feeling that he is an Israeli. And I truly am an Israeli, despite my Brooklyn accent. You'll hear a little more about that soon. But I speak Hebrew with an accent as well. And estudio español en la escuelas para 2 años. I speak a little bit Spanish because I grew up in Hispanic Bedford-Stuyvesant. I was the only Jew surrounded by Hispanics. So I'm ready for the Spanish language in heaven. Please God. Please God. But I want to just take one slight issue. This is truly an historic gathering. But hear me very well. It is not only for Israel. It is for the sake of the entire free world. We must unite for the world. And this is really the subject of my talk with you this afternoon. Jews and Christians walking together, a new hope for the future. We started about 5 years ago a Center for Jewish Christian Understanding and Cooperation in Efrat, Israel. This past year alone, 7,700 Christians have come through our portals to study about the Jewish roots of Christianity, the root and the branch, the root and the fruit, both in God and both in Abraham. Why did I start it? What made me believe so strongly and so profoundly in the importance of our meeting together in cooperation and in love? My initial forays into interfaith relations began very, very positively when I was 13 years old, bar mitzvah. My parents used to give me $1 a week allowance. And my father told me quite seriously, now you're a man, you're bar mitzvah, you're 13, no more allowance. You'll have to find a way to make the dollar yourself. And so I became a salesman and deliverer of a newspaper, I'm not even sure it still exists, called the Brooklyn Eagle. For 10 cents a week, an individual would get a paper delivered to his door every day. And I was the deliverer. For the deliveries, I wore a baseball cap. The neighborhood was rough, and sometimes Jews weren't treated so well by the Hispanics and the African Americans. They were treated very well, I must say. There were other minorities that didn't quite treat us so well, but you'll see in a moment, they also came through for me. At any rate, I delivered the Brooklyn Eagle. And every week, there was a woman who would come out, and usually I would get a 2-cent tip or a 3-cent tip. And she would always look at me and give me a pinch on my cheeks and said, "For a nice Italian Catholic boy." Now, I'll tell you the truth. She put a quarter in my hand, a quarter tip for a dime a week for the newspaper. I took a deep breath, swallowed my conscience, and smiled. I didn't say a word. For a full year, I felt guilty about it. And at the end of the year, she came out again, and of course, with a quarter for a nice Italian Catholic boy. And I said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you, and I don't want to disappoint you, but I'm a Jewish boy." And she stopped for a minute, and she looked at me, and she said, "That's all right. Our Lord Jesus was also a nice Jewish boy." And she put a quarter in my hand again. That was truly my introduction, a very positive introduction to interfaith relations. And it continued very profoundly, really, for me. When I went to Israel for the first time in 1960, I was just after college, before rabbinical school. And rabbinical school I knew was going to be in New York with Rabbi Soloveitchik, my teacher, a great rabbi and great educator and great legalist and great philosopher theologian. But one year I wanted to study in Israel. I studied at the Hebrew University. It was a panoply of stars. I caught the last seminar given by Martin Buber, Gershon Sholem. I took 2 courses with him. It was an amazing experience. And I also studied with Professor David Flusser. And Professor Flusser was, and even after his passing still remains, the expert on early Christianity, what is called the intertestamental period in scholarship. And this was a class. Then we were not in the campus of the Hebrew University. There was no Mount Scopus. This was before the 6-Day War. We were out of the old city of Jerusalem. But there was a campus in Givat Ram in Jerusalem, and he had a very large lecture room. When he gave public lectures, there were hundreds and hundreds of people who came. For this particular class, that you had to take an exam to get into the class, there were only 4 students. The class was the Gospel of Matthew, the story of Jesus, in Greek. And in order to take the class, you had to translate and interpret 2 texts. One, a Greek text of one of the Gospels, and the other, a Talmud Aramaic text. So not many people even bothered to take the test. And 4 people were in the class. There was an Israeli bus driver, only in Israel, a redneck bus driver, who knew Greek, knew Talmud, was interested in Jesus, and totally a-religious. But he was in the class. The other was a young woman, a seminar student, a nun from Bonn, Germany, in Protestant gray habit. The third was Brother Yochanan, a young monk from Terra Sancta. He was 21, I was 20. We became fast friends and went to the movies together every Saturday night. And me. Those were the four people in the class. I told you I became really almost blood brothers with Ach Yochanan. He wanted to give his life to the church. I was heaven bent on becoming an Orthodox rabbi. We had much, much in common, and we spoke about everything. And he knew that my fondest dream at that time was to be able to give the priestly benediction, because I'm a Kohen, at the kotel, at the wall, the western wall of the Holy Temple. And a few weeks before Passover and before Easter, Shlomo, he said to me, I can get you to the western wall for your Passover. You'll be able to give the priestly benediction. I looked at him in disbelief. He said, this Saturday night before we go to the movies, come to the garden of Terra Sancta, bring me your passport, you'll fill out a pro forma form, and it will all happen, I promise you. I almost didn't sleep for the rest of the week. I met him on Saturday night. I came with my passport and very excitedly began to fill out the form. My mother's maiden name, you know, the birth dates, all the usual nonsense. And then the final line. I hereby declare that I am a believing and affirming Christian. I began to tremble. I said, Yochanan, I can't sign this. He said, what do you mean you can't sign it? Just sign it. You'll become a pilgrim. You're an American citizen. Just sign it. I'm not asking you to baptize yourself. Just sign it. And then there poured out from my mouth very strong words and tears from my eyes. And I tried to explain what 2,000 years of persecution in the name of the founder of Christianity meant to the Jewish people. And I said to him, you know, we have no higher service to God than the study of His Torah and His law. But there's one night a week when Jews are not allowed to study Torah. And that's Christmas Eve. Because that's when all the pogroms against the Jews took place in Europe. When more often than not, the priests would call us Christ killers. And people were sent out to murder Jews. And Jews didn't have home libraries. No one had home libraries then. They went to the study hall. And every evening, usually, every father would come home from a difficult day of work and have a little dinner of a piece of herring and bread, and would go to the study house and pray the evening prayer and study the holy texts. If everyone, all the males, the heads of the households, were in the study house, one match could destroy all the families of that town. So we were forbidden to study. I can't sign this. He was also crying. He said to me, then we can't be friends anymore. I said, but we're brothers. And he said, but you hate my God. I said, I don't hate your God. We're sitting together in the same classroom with Professor Flusser. I see your God as a wonderful Jewish teacher within the Talmudic tradition. I hate what 2,000 years of Christian leadership made of your God. That's what I hate. He said, no. If you hate my God, then you hate me. And from that moment on, we never spoke another word. And as I retell the story, it's traumatic for me. Because I can't say it any more strongly, it broke my heart. The years went by. I got my doctorate, my rabbinical degree, moved to Israel. My beloved teacher before then, Rabbi Soloveitchik, wrote a very important work called Confrontation, a theological piece, in which he spoke about the importance of the Jew confronting the world. And in confronting the world, also confronting other faith communities. And he spoke specifically about the Catholic faith community because the Catholic community, specifically Pope John the 23rd, had reached out to Rabbi Soloveitchik and had reached out to Professor Heschel as part of an aggiornamento, a restructuring and reordering even of theology within the Catholic Church. And my teacher, at that point, was not ready to cooperate. And he wrote why, in very strong terms. He said that we should confront the other faith community. And it's right that we confront the other faith community, not in order to change them or us, with the full understanding that religious truths can never be debated or argued because they're too precious to each of us. With the full understanding that we certainly share in common many critical and lofty ethical principles and moral ideals that the world needs. However, he said, the other community, the Christian community, are far more numerous than we are. And they, for the last 2,000 years, have not respected us as an equal faith community. Replacement theology teaches, successionism teaches, that they have become the new Jews, and that there is no longer room in God's heart for us. And in such an atmosphere, there's nothing to dialogue about. And it was a very strong piece. And it was a very forthright and bold piece. And Rabbi Soloveitchik truly said it as it was at that time. But there's a fascinatingly important verse in the Bible. Zachor Yemot Olam, the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Remember the days of old. Binu Shnot Dor Vador. Understand the years from generation to generation. And this very interesting commandment is understood by many of our greatest teachers, like Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, that it is a commandment to study history. George Santayana said it very well. If we don't study history, we will be doomed to repeat its mistakes. And therefore, there's a mitzvah, a commandment to study history. But Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch adds something very interestingly. Binu Shnot Dor Vador, understand, I said the years from generation to generation. But the Hebrew word shana, shnot, can mean year and it can mean change. Shinui. Every year brings change. That's the hope at a new year. So what Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch magnificently interprets, study the changes of every generation. Understand them. Respond to them the way you must. And you see, what came out of the Aggiornamento was the famous papal encyclical Nostra Aetata in 1965, a year and a half after Rabbi Soloveitchik had written his confrontation. And this encyclical said two very critical and important things. First of all, God does not repent of his covenants. When God made a covenant with Israel, that's an eternal covenant. Indeed, that's what the word covenant means. An eternal contract that can never be recalled. God is eternal. His covenants are eternal. And therefore, we are his eternal people. That's the first part of the covenant. And what this means as well is, and so that encyclical also stated, anti-Semitism and charges of deicide are reprehensible and not admissible for any Christian. This was a sea change. And leading Catholic spokespeople, most notably Pope John Paul II, who begged forgiveness of the Jewish people for all of the atrocities against us for 2,000 years. Leading Protestant theologians, although the Protestants are still in large measure sometimes a bit slow to recognize the truths of that encyclical. But there are many leading Protestant theologians who stand at the forefront. But especially the evangelical Christians. And behind this encyclical are two very important historic occurrences which opened the eyes, I think, to the leading church people. The first, the Holocaust. I think it was clear to every decent churchman that the Holocaust never could have taken place in Europe to the extent of the deicide, the genocide of 6 million Jews, men, women, babies, children. Had it not been for the seeds of anti-Semitism that the church had sown for those 2,000 years. Secondly, the very existence of the State of Israel. Orthodox Christian theology had taught that the Jews were doomed to wander because they did not recognize the sanctity, the messiahship of Jesus. But we stopped wandering. And the State of Israel became a reality. And the honest heads of the church understood very well that this meant that they had to reorganize ad giornamento their theological thinking and teachings, at least insofar as Israel was concerned, and the negative teachings that had heretofore been made. And that's the situation that made me understand so strongly that we had to respond as Jews to this change. A heart feels a heart, and the Christian heart was reaching out to the Jewish soul. The branch was returning to the roots. Doesn't mean giving in on any of your theological principles without asking us to give up on any of our theological principles, but suddenly understanding that what unites us is far more significant than that which divides us. That's what happened. And that's what made it so tremendously important for us to take your hand and to go all of the next steps to walk together for a new hope for the future. And what do I mean by this? And now I want to return to my earlier statement. We're living in very special, in very fateful, in very miraculous, in very glorious times. We've seen the confirmation of God's covenant. And a great historian from Harvard University, Professor Huntington, in a magnificent and crucially important book called The Clash of Civilizations, puts it very, very, very well. Perhaps he doesn't seem so politically correct as some people would like him to be. But Professor Huntington is a great scholar, a great political expert in world affairs, and one of the leading experts on Arab affairs. So he puts it exactly the way it is. He calls this the era of the Fourth World War. For him, the Third World War was the silent war that was waged between communism and the free world. This, he says, the war which is now going on in the Middle East, but in all parts of the world, because New York and Indonesia and London and Mali are all affected. He calls this the Fourth World War between those who love peace and those who work for jihad. Now, Islam doesn't have to be jihadist. There were times in the Middle Ages when it was not. The Sufi interpretation, the Kalam interpretation of Islam. But unfortunately, certainly in the Middle East, that's not the interpretation. It's the Wahhabi interpretation. It's the jihadist interpretation. And I want everyone to understand as strongly as you can understand it. Monotheism is not the point. God says in Genesis 18, verses 18 and 19, through you, the children of Abraham, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. But on what basis? Why did God choose Abraham? You know, there's a little adage, how odd of God to choose the Jews. An anti-Semite wrote it. A Philo-Semite answered, it was not at all odd because the Jews chose God. Here too. God says, I'll tell you why I chose Abraham. Ki yidativ, I have known him, I have loved him, I have chosen him because he is teaching his children and his household after him to walk in the ways of the Lord, which is to love tzedakah u'mishpat, compassionate righteousness and moral justice. Monotheism is not the issue. Ethical monotheism is the issue. If you believe in a God, in an Allah who urges suicide bombers against innocent human beings, that's not ethical monotheism. It's not even monotheism. It's mono-Satanism. And that's not what God wants. It's the antithesis of what God wants. And this is the war going on. On the one hand, the Islamic fundamentalists trying to spread their hate and their noxious lies throughout the world and succeeding in spreading that hatred in the unhallowed halls of the disunited and dysfunctional nations. Tragically. But during these fateful times, something else is happening. Many people are returning to religion in very large numbers. Many people are returning to the Bible in very large numbers. And the two of us are beginning to march forward together. We both believe in a God of love and morality and peace. Not a God of power and not a God of jihad. We both believe that there is such a thing called absolute morality. Thou shalt not murder an innocent human being. That's absolute morality. No Palestinian liberationist theology can change that absolute morality. And we believe in this together. We both believe in the right of everyone to be free, and that's why we have always, since the beginning of our conflict, been willing to compromise even on the land of Israel. but the other side has never been willing. But we both believe that everyone has a right to be free, and everyone has a right to be inviolate. And the jihadists believe that only those who believe the way they do have a right not only to be free, but to be alive. And that's a terrible, terrible difference. When I was young, high school young, I used to read a lot of science fiction. It's amazing how much science fiction I read then is now science and fact. But I'll never forget the short story by, I believe it was Robert Heinlein. The Third World War was about to begin. There was one last-ditch attempt, and the two major powers agreed not to bear arms until they would give a full year of time so that every major thinker, humanist, scientist could pour her knowledge into a giant computer that was set up in the Hall of the United Nations. And all of the wisdom of the ages and the wisdom of our age would fill that computer. And then the question would be put to the computer: what is the road to world peace? Is there an answer? And only after the answer came forth, if it were not satisfactory, would the Third World War begin, which meant the destruction of humanity. Any pictures you could imagine, it was just the beginnings of television at that time. Everyone was glued to their television sets. The whole world was waiting. What is the answer for world peace? And chug, 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 the computer goes and vibrates. This is the answer to world peace. I am the Lord thy God, who took thee out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not covet. The 10 Commandments that we each revere. We cannot stand if we are divided. If we are united, not only will we survive, but we will prevail. And prevail we must for the sake of the free world and for the sake of the God who loves all of his children. We must walk together for the sake of a meaningful future for the world. Thank you very, very much.